All right, great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Rachel Tayse, and you are in the Technical Assistance and Local Farming Resources session, and I'm going to begin screen sharing. Okay, for the heck of it, I am closed captioning because that's something that Google allows us to do, and that was the presentation that I chose. So you'll see those down below, and hopefully they won't be too distracting. Hopefully they'll get my words somewhat correct, and there are not too many giggles about incorrect captioning. So I designed this presentation today thinking about the various resources that I know of in Ohio to help with farmers and specifically technical assistance, but especially towards beginning farmers and socially disadvantaged farmers and alternative farming practices. So I just wanted to ground you in why this is important to me. This is a quote from Leela Watson, who's an Indigenous person from Australia. "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And as some of the previous speakers and keynoters have noted, we are in unprecedented times with global climate change and racial unrest and societal difficulties of dealing with a pandemic. I truly believe that small-scale diversified agriculture is a solution to a lot of these things, but I can't do it alone, and you can't do it alone, and no one can. We have to work on these things together. And so that's why I am so happy to be here today talking to you. So a little bit more about me. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Begin Farming Program Coordinator at OEFFA. We are the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association. We're a membership-based organization that also certifies organic farms throughout a 12-state region in the Midwest. I myself am a first-generation female urban farmer. I have a 2-acre permaculture-inspired diversified produce farm here in Columbus, Ohio. And like I said before, I really think that food production can be a strategy for positive change. If any of you are familiar with Dr. Monica White and her Freedom Farmers book, she considers it a form of constructive resistance, and I like that. If we're upset with the status quo, I think that developing farms that are as diverse as we want to see in the world are a really good first step to solving some of these big problems. Unfortunately, it's not easy, and it's not easy to go against the status quo and to find the support for diversified farmers. So in 1979, the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association was formed, and our mission is to cultivate a future in which sustainable and organic farmers thrive, local food nourishes our communities, and agricultural practices protect and enhance the environment. So to that end, my organization provides a lot of services, and I'll tell you more about those as we go along. So these are the 4 areas of questions and resource needs that I typically encounter in my work with farmers. They're production needs, management, financial, and personal. We're going to go through each of those sections with some suggestions for you about connecting to local resources and opportunities for technical assistance. And at the end of each little section, I will leave room for questions. Since we're a small group, again, like Rachel said, you can pop those questions into the chat box during my presentation, and when I stop, she's going to read them out to me so I can answer. So the first thing that most farmers are interested in is developing their production skills. And this is key, especially on a sustainable and diversified farm or an urban farm where you're trying to maximize the utility of a small piece of land. Knowing how to produce food is really important. There are many regulations that are set up throughout the city and the state and federal regulations that control food safety and the distribution of food, and learning about those by actually being on a farm is one of the best things that you can do for yourself. So I highly recommend that people interested in farming work or volunteer on a farm. Use the experience of another farmer to gain your own experience. It will be less costly and it will be faster to learn. As a lot of even the mentor and elder farmers say, make mistakes on someone else's farm, break their tractor, you know, let those kinds of things happen when they aren't actually costing your bottom line. So to that end, OEFFA offers internships, apprenticeships, and mentorships, but other organizations do too. And I highly recommend seeking out a farm that you admire and learning from them versus reading a book. Books are great. I've got some listed there too, but you're going to get so much more experience by actually being on a farm. Of course, there are classes and workshops. Your local county extension likely has something, and depending on where you are, a lot of those are virtual right now, so you shop around. If you are in a rural area, but you are interested in urban farming, check out some of the Master Urban Farmer training that people like Franklin County are offering. There are farmer-led courses. I'm thinking of a beginning farmer I worked with last year, signed up for Floret Flower Farm class, and Sunny Meadows Flower Farm here in Groveport, Ohio is offering a flower growing class. These can be really great ways to have the same level of experience that a farmer might share on their farm, but in a virtual or workshop setting. And then of course there are conferences like this one for production specifically. In Ohio, if you're interested in sustainable agriculture, the OEFFA conference is popular. Here's what I would be handing out to you, and I have a better picture of it, this beautiful postcard advertising our conference with everything from very specific production skills to business skills. There's farm conference that Ohio State University often puts on. If you're on a bigger scale, the Farm Science Review might be interesting, and it's virtual and free this year. And then keep your eye out through membership organizations or those other organizations for farm tours and pasture walks. I know that Agraria arranged prior to this conference some farm tours, and that's another great way to just be right on a farm and say, wait, you know, what's that implement, or where did you get that, or how much did that cost? Those kinds of questions are invaluable. Then if there are several places that you can find written material, I want to highlight a few that aren't as known. ATRA is a resource that has a ton, a website that has a ton of fact sheets developed across the country focused on sustainable agriculture. SARE, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, also has a lot of fact sheets. They have books, they have videos, and they also are a funding source. We'll talk about funding later, but they fund farmer-led research, which is really critical, I think, as opposed to institutional research, which sometimes gets at very niche and specific things which are helpful, but they're not the same as what actually works on an actual farm. There are industry journals, and your seed and supply catalogs can be invaluable. I grow seedlings, and the Johnny's catalog has just tons of information in it that allow me to make my crop plan and things like that. Then some organizations offer direct technical assistance, and what that means to me at OEFFA is that I might get an email, I or some of the other sustainable ag educators, that asks, do you know where I can buy molasses for feed? And then we go back and forth and have a conversation about, you know, how much do you need, where are you needed, and I can help find specific answers like that. So feel free to reach out to me, and my contact information will be at the end if you need direct technical assistance. Your county extension is also a place you can ask those kinds of questions. All right, so I'm going to stop there and let Rachel answer or feed me a few questions from the chat box.
All right, so far I'm not seeing any questions. Does anyone have any questions off the top of their heads at the moment? All right, here's one. What are the topic areas where you see the most requests for technical assistance?
I get a lot of questions around organic specifics. So if you're not familiar with organic certification, it's a federal certification that has a set of standards, and farmers have to make a plan that shows how they will meet those standards. So, and since OEFFA has an organic certification arm, we also provide technical assistance around organic production. That might be everything from, let's see, a couple weeks ago, I took a call from a farmer who was looking for an organic seed source for cover cropping, to another farmer who was calling in about what were the options for building a high tunnel and baseboards in the high tunnel, because organic certification does not allow you to buy treated lumber and put that next to the soil. So I do a lot of talking to folks about that. And then some troubleshooting of disease management and pest management. Those are pretty common, you know, seasonally in the production realm.
All right. And Crystal Johnson asked, what are the 12 states that you work with?
Oh, that's a hard question. I would refer you to our certification website. It's basically Ohio, the surrounding states, and then we kind of get up into Michigan and down into Missouri. So I, on the education side, can work with anyone. So if you are from Oregon and you have a question that I might be able to answer, I'm happy to do that. And the other sustainable ag educators can talk to anybody. The certification arm of our organization only can work with areas, and that's set up due to their own capacity and their interest in making sure that they have deep experience in the states where farmers are closest to OEFFA. All right, let's go on to management skills. So as the man from the Southern Cooperative Federation, Terrence, I think, was saying that it's really important that farmers go beyond just growing food, but really think of their farm as a business. And when you do that, obviously it can impact your personal, financial, and economic potential, but it also really elevates the whole system of agriculture when we are treating things as a business. So developing your management skills is something that's really important too, and you need resources. Most people need resources for that. Farms can do a lot of things for you. Having a farm business can do a lot of things, including reduce your property taxes. It can provide personal income, but it also opens up some legal liability. And a farm, whether you run it as a business or not, has some legal liability to consider. So if you are brand new and you have never owned a business before, you can go to your local small business center, small business development center, and take just basic business classes. Learn about basic business organization, record keeping, financials, all of that. If you have a little bit of business experience and you're just looking for farming, you're sure that farming is the business that you want, then I recommend these resources. OEFFA does a year-long farm business planning course called Farm Beginnings, and registration is still open for that for another 2 weeks. But we have a pretty full class already. So if you're interested in that, please do check it out soon. In that course, we start with visioning and really get a holistic goal written down. And that's super important for businesses to know why they're doing what they're doing and where they want to be. And then we kind of work backwards and talk about what's the organizational structure that makes the most sense. What are the record keeping patterns that you're going to follow in your business? What's the liability you need to be concerned about? out, and then we do a lot of financial planning. That Farm Beginnings course, if you wanted to take it kind of on your own, I would recommend this SARE Sustainable Business Planning link. That takes you to a PDF download, which is free, or you can buy a book from them, which I think costs only maybe $13. It's a great investment, and it really walks you through how to plan a sustainable farm business with all the worksheets and things that you might need to do. I take a lot of information from Farm Commons, which is a resource, which is an organization by a lawyer named Rachel, so all the Rachels are represented today. She started this because she noticed that there was lots of legal information around, but there wasn't a lot that was tailored to small diversified farms. And in our current litigious society, which I wish weren't so, but it is, farms are a huge liability. We have all kinds of risks out on a farm, from the physical risk of operating tractors, having volunteers or children around, to the liability of food, and food safety laws pretty much put the liability right back on the farmer these days. So getting yourself in a secure legal position, knowing what the boundaries are in terms of employee law and your legal liability can really save you from making some big mistakes, big costly mistakes in farming. Here at home, we have the OSU Farm Office with Peggy Kirk Hall. She writes the most interesting little briefs in an ag law blog, which sound like very dorky, but if you're at all interested in this, I highly recommend you sign up for those ag law blog briefs. She's a nationally known farm lawyer and a really great person, so we're very lucky to have her. I mentioned in the previous session about the Center for Cooperatives, which is based out of the OSU South Centers in Piketon. Hannah Scott there teaches folks about how to make cooperative businesses. She has a lot of resources just right online, and then can provide technical assistance as well. And again, I'll mention keeping your eye out for workshops, for mentorships. The OEFFA mentorship program is not only for production skills, but we are happy to find a mentor for you who can help you organize your business if that's what you're really looking for. So I wanted to mention this in this slide. You'll see the high tunnel, and that's one of our Farm Beginnings graduates, Walt Bonham, and he's giving a tour of his high tunnel that's part of the Richland Grow Op. So if you're interested in cooperatives based on the last session or just in general, there is out of Mansfield, Ohio, a group of urban farmers that have formed a cooperative called the Richland Grow Op. They have a lot of support from the OSU Mansfield staff. And I've been following them as an example of a really embedded, community embedded cooperative that is emerging. So it's pretty exciting. If you're in that area, definitely check them out. And if you're not, I think they have some plans to do education and outreach too. I should mention that all of these slides have hyperlinks. You can see that, and I will share them with everyone. Actually, I think Rachel already did. So you don't feel the need that you have to write everything down if you want to come back to it. All right, so let's stop there for any management specific questions. All right, hearing none, I will move on. Financial and land resources. These are critical because, so the picture is a farm, a dairy farm that OEFFA certifies. This is Settlage and Settlage Dairy. They sell into Organic Valley. So if you're buying Organic Valley milk in the northwestern part of the state, you might be drinking milk from this farm. And Jordan started the farm on his family's grazing land that had grazed cattle for about 30 years. They have been doing intensification for most of that time. And that's great. It's beautiful. It is an amazing vision of what a farm can look like with a long-term commitment to soil health and a multiple generations of that. But a lot of us, I would hazard to guess, based on the topic of this conference, most of us don't have that kind of resource in our family, myself included. So we then are faced with both searching for land and searching for capital, for dollars to fund our projects that we envision. Due to systemic racism and sexism, some of us are starting out, way further behind. And that is unfortunate, and it is ongoing, but there are really creative solutions to navigating these resources. So I'm going to mention a few. In terms of capital, this is the big money. The FSA does have loans that are targeted toward beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers. Typically, you have to be denied by a bank before they will loan you money, but they do have some very convenient and super low interest rates. So I urge you, as soon as you know you want to farm and you have set up your entity and you have a business plan, to talk to an FSA officer and see what the opportunities might be. They typically require some experience. So again, going back to the production, if you've worked on a farm for a few years, this is going to be an advantage to you accessing an FSA loan. If you take the OEFFA Farm Beginnings class, that counts as a year of experience. So when you graduate, you have a certificate that can be used for a year of experience for an FSA loan. But they're all the hoops to jump through, just the hardest. It can happen. I know people with FSA loans, but some of us just don't want to loan at all, or don't want to do that much, back and forth conversation challenge. Kiva microloans are another way to finance a smaller project. OEFFA is a trustee for Kiva microloans, which means that we can endorse them, and it goes kind of to the top of their crowdfunding. I have a friend who used a Kiva loan to finance a hay baler, and the way that Kiva works is, the farmer says they need $10,000, and basically they find a bunch of people who can donate $25 and then pay them back in these little micro increments. So if you have a small-ish project, a Kiva microloan can be pretty convenient. I've heard that they're very easy to set up, and OEFFA could help. I can help you with that if you need. I want to throw a shout out to just general crowdfunding. We're all seeing the GoFundMe pages right now for people who are really struggling in the current crisis. And some organizations and farms are using the racial unrest and the interest in reparations to crowdfund massive amounts of capital. I think of Soulfire Farm out of New York, who is building a brand new education center based on crowdfunding, and I don't know this exact statistics, but they raised several $100,000 in basically a weekend by putting up a GoFundMe saying, we're Black farmers, this is what we need, pay up. So if you have that clear vision and you're willing to push on social media and you're engaged on social media, this is a real opportunity. Moving on to land, really I suggest that you kind of get your farm business and your money situation like in mind before you look for land. But I'll mention there's a farm link that we operate that kind of is the dating site for people who have farmland and beginning farmers to make profiles and match and talk and make leases. Do not enter into any land agreement, including with the land bank, including with your mother, including with anyone in my nation, without making a lease. I've linked to a lease builder that I recommend. There are several out there, but just get something written down, because when you're investing in the land with your heart and soul, to have somebody else own it and then do something you don't want is just so challenging and devastating. So if you have things in writing, that's much less likely to happen. I'll mention Young Farmers has a farmland calculator if you need some help with kind of seeing how much you can afford. So that's a good resource too. Then when we're talking about equipment and supplies, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is part of the USDA, has a program called EQIP, Environmental Qualities Incentive Program. And what they do is they come out to your land and what are the environmental needs happening here? And that could be everything from, wow, there's like not very many birds here, and maybe we want some bird habitat, to the farmer isn't able to produce year round, so they need a high tunnel. And they have specific dollar values that they have in mind for those projects, and they will put you in contract with them, and you can get a high tunnel for a very reasonable price, or sometimes $0. You can get irrigation support, you can get woodlot management, all of that. It does take a long time. It is tedious in my experience. I have been talking to my NRCS agent for I think 5 years, and I believe I'm now in contract to do a project starting next summer. So not a fast way, but it is a free way to get irrigation in my front field, which is what I'm doing. I'm not going to go too far into grants, but there are a lot of grants available for a lot of different programs. I would say if you're not familiar with grants at all, participate in someone else's grant project first, whether that's research or education and outreach through SARE. I have a whole separate presentation about grants, so if that's something you're interested in, hit me up and we can talk about that another time. The reparations link there goes to a map. So if you're a Black farmer and you are seeking reparations, add yourself to that map, and then white people or organizations can search for projects to support there, and I highly recommend you do that. So, questions about finances and land?
I am not currently seeing any questions, but maybe people are doing some typing.
This terrible slide. So one of the things you'll note if you've ever tried to find anything on a USDA website is that it's pretty complicated, and here's why. When you get the information, you can click on the link and that will open the PDF for you, but these are all the programs that the USDA runs in the local food supply chain. So each one of these different colors is a different program. It's great that they have so many programs, and really there are resources within our federal government for almost anything that you want to do as a small, diversified, environmentally friendly farmer. However, they each have their own rules, they each have their own staff, they each have their own like timelines. It's a lot. So I love that they created this sheet, which is actually fairly, once you get into it and look at it, it's fairly understandable, but it also exemplifies that this is a complicated thing, and you may need someone like myself or an extension agent or a just advocate within an office to help you find the right place for yourself. They also all take time. So give yourself that time. All right, so I have to address the personal because in my opinion, being grounded in yourself and taking care of your own personal food sovereignty and your family's needs has to happen before you are serving the public or the community by growing food, or else you face burnout or worse, you know, stress-related injuries and illnesses. So, you know, and that's where I have to admit that there have been, as you've heard in other presentations, intensive, intentional, regular discrimination against anyone who isn't a white hetero male farmer. And I'm sorry to say that I've experienced it myself, just as a female farmer. But actually in 1999, the Pigford versus Glickman case was a class action lawsuit against the USDA about their discriminatory lending practices against people of color. And it is currently has been appropriated over $1 billion of payments back to families of these farmers of color from whom their farms were actually stolen by the USDA. So that's part of the reason that they have priority now for socially disadvantaged identities. But it's also cultural and isn't over in all cases. It's still ongoing. So your experience will vary from your neighbor, a friend, someone else in a class that you take about your access to resources. And that goes for really anyone. I have a friend who is a educated, hetero white woman, very similar to myself. And she got her high tunnel with NRCS in the same county 3.5 years ago. And I'm still working on my NRCS project. So even if you share identities with someone, your experience may vary with these kinds of programs. And that's just the truth. And I think being aware of it is something that can help you get past it. I do advise, although I personally struggled with claiming your disadvantage. You know, I didn't want to admit that being a woman farmer was disadvantaged, but it is. So if you have the opportunity, feel comfortable checking that box, because I absolutely believe that diversity is necessary in farming. That's diversity of production practices, diversity of the people doing the production, diversity of the species that we're growing and eating. That's the only thing that's going to make us resilient in the face of climate change and pandemics and dietary problems. I'll mention a few advocates beyond OEFFA, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. OEFFA is a member of, but folks in that group are really leading the way in terms of advocating for policies that protect diversity in production and in the farmers. Young farmers, for those of us who have less than 10 years of experience farming, that is a policy group that advocates for young farmers in federal policy, and they also have some state offices and programs. And then look for local chapters of any organization that speaks to you. OEFFA has some local chapters. Young Farmers have active chapters in other states. You might find a community gardening group that accepts you as a farmer and you can learn from and you can feel supported by. You can start a group yourself of folks who are doing similar things, and you can support each other personally. And then I highly recommend that you put self-care in your holistic goal for your farm. I don't know a lot of farmers who get past years 7 and 8 without being very intentional about taking time for themselves and their families. It just has to be done. So that's the end of the remarks that I prepared, and we're getting towards the end of the session. There's that pretty graphic again and my information, and I will open it up now for any other questions that you have. I'm curious what resources or technical assistance you need or were expecting that maybe I haven't addressed, or anything about what I have shared.
I am not currently seeing any questions in the chat, but perhaps we can just give a couple minutes. I was able to go to my first OEFFA conference last year.
Yeah.
Right before COVID.
Yeah. I was gonna, I think this has the map. Somebody asked about coverage, because you can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
So there's the states that we are currently in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop then. Cool. Oh yeah, I see e-organic mentioned in the chat box. Yeah, that's great too. I didn't mention like email newsletters, but there are quite a lot of email listservs that have pretty great information. And if you know, I think I'm on all of them because it's my job. So if there's something specific that you are interested in, let me know. And I see somebody with a National Farmers Union background on that self-care note. They have an awesome resource for mental health and stress right now. That's like a training for farmers and farm educators and community leaders. Highly, highly recommend that.
Did you see that nice comment?
Yeah. Thanks. Marjorie is going to be in our Farm Beginnings class, and I'm super excited to get to know you more.
Great, and thank you for that link on the farm stress education.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the food justice certification?
Yeah, I can say a few words about that, sure. So food justice certification has been around for quite a while, and they were operating as an independent entity until about a year and a half ago. OEFFA was asked if we would be the certifying body. So we are still, you're able to be certified through OEFFA, but we're still, you know, kind of gaining traction in terms of farms. It's an add-on certification to organic, so you have to start at the organic baseline and then meet these other standards, which largely have to do with wages, employee treatment. Do you adequately have healthcare and time off and vacation and sick care for employees? How are things communicated? It's very rigorous. But really important to a lot of folks. As many of you probably have seen, speaking of these wildfires, like there is so much labor in agriculture, particularly in the West, who are now operating under COVID conditions and in these poor air quality conditions to pick food. And is that just? Is that right? There's a lot of questions around that. So if you're a farm and you want to communicate to your customers with an impartial certification, food justice is something to consider. Okay, so it looks like we're at break time, and I firmly believe in not staring at screens all day. So I encourage you to take a break. I learned something a couple weeks ago that if you stare at the horizon for just 20 seconds, it can help reset your parasympathetic nerve system, which is something that we all need. That's what lowers our stress, and it also eases your eye strain. So I invite you to take 20 seconds to stare at the sky with me in this break, And then it looks like there's lots of options our next breakout session. So thanks so much for being with me now, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.